afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Columbus Metro Club. I'm Amelia Robinson, Opinion and Community Engagement Editor at the Columbus Dispatch, and I'm also a very proud member of the CMC Board of Trustees. I am also extremely pleased to welcome you all to today's forum. I would like to thank today's sponsors. We have Event Marketing Strategies and the Thanks Be to God Foundation. We also are very grateful for the Centers for, I'm sorry, let's clap for them. Yeah, let's clap for them, you're right. Yeah, wave your hands like you just don't care. Okay. We also are very thankful for the Centers for Kindness at the Columbus Foundation and the Columbus Dispatch, who is a very proud live stream sponsor. And we also carry these on our social media platforms, so check that out. Thanks to Grange Insurance Audubon Center for hosting us again, and thanks to everyone else who supported today's forum. In a landmark decision this June, the Supreme Court ruled that affirmative action in college admissions violated the 14th Amendment and had to end in higher education. At the same time, D&I initiatives at private companies are coming under fire. What's next for affirmative action and DEI, especially for employers? Today, we will unpack this important topic and what the Supreme Court's decision means for the future of equity in the United States. To introduce today's speakers, I am very pleased to welcome Dwight Smith from today's sponsor, Thanks Be to God Foundation. Dwight, the podium is yours.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Columbus Metropolitan Club for continuing their leadership and having these very engaging and enlightening conversations. The TBTG Foundation has supported programs and initiatives around Central Ohio and around the world for over 20 years. On Monday, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. I share that dream. Dr. King dreamed of an America with equality for all, where inequality was a thing of the past. Many people believe we have achieved that dream, and others think that we are still on the journey. When George Floyd was murdered, we were shocked and appalled at the video and the disturbing conversation that followed. People came together, black, white, young, old, and male and female, to step into the conversation about equity and social justice. Given the recent Supreme Court decision regarding affirmative action and college admissions, this is a very timely conversation. And the decision didn't stop with college admissions. One example is a letter sent by 13 state attorney generals to large corporations around America saying, stand down on your DEI efforts, even though the data and the research shows that diversity offers significant benefits. Just last week, another lawsuit was filed against two US-based firms, US law firms, over providing fellowships to support diversity in their organization and in the legal profession. As divisive winds circle around our country, we in Columbus are a shining light. We stand above the noise, able to have these type of conversations that we'll have today, meaningful, respectful, and inclusive. So it is my honor to introduce our esteemed panelists, and I'll start, if you'll just give a wave, with Aaron Butler of counsel with Bricker and Grayton, Margaret Finley, head of DEI and Corporate Affairs for Advanced Drainage Systems, Dr. Cynthia Turner, Assistant Dean and Chief Diversity Officer for the Fisher College at The Ohio State University, and our host for today, Cerise Sledge-Thomas, Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity and Access for the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. I should say our Columbus Chamber of Commerce. So you can read all about the panelists by scanning the QR codes on your table. Cerise, I'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for coming out today. Thank you.
So thank you, Doug. I want to make sure before we start with this esteemed and amazing panel, and I can say that because, you know, they're my DEI peeps. I want to make sure that we all are clear on what affirmative action is. So when you think about affirmative action, it's a set of policies that were established to address historical inequalities and also to promote equal opportunities for individuals from underrepresented groups. So as we chat today, I want you to think about that definition and keep it in your mind, because it'll be really important as we go through the journey of this conversation. So I'm going to start out with Erin. So how effective was affirmative action in achieving its intended goals?
So that's going to very much depend on who you ask that question to. The Supreme Court had very different views among the individuals on it. And I will tell you that the majority would define what they were examining a little bit differently from affirmative action. They would say it's never been legal to really redress general past wrongs and admissions policies, and they view it a little bit differently. I think you have very vocal dissenting opinions in that case that will tell you, as many additional briefs from schools across the country, that their experience has been that affirmative action has been very effective in increasing the numbers of specifically Black and Hispanic students within their populations. There's a lot of data, and as we see in the Supreme Court case, it can be viewed in different lenses depending on who's looking at it. So you also had a majority who said, well, depending on who you ask, even within the majority, they didn't view it that way because of the level of scrutiny that has to be applied to. So that is a very legal answer to your question.
Well, we always start with the legal answer, right? That's one of the things we want to hear. So Dr. Turner and I were having a conversation about this very same question, and we'd like to hear your point of view.
Well, if we follow what the intentions were when affirmative action was enacted, it was to remedy injustices, in particular against people of color, Black specifically. And so if you look at the numbers, the data shows that it did do some good things. For instance, in 1965, there were only 5% of all undergraduates were Blacks. And by 2001, it had doubled to 10%. Even now, when we look at the data as of 2020, we have the Hispanic and Latino population increasing the most, from 4% in 1980 to just over 20% in 2020. The Black student population has hovered around 10. Now it was about 13% in 2020. The Asian and Pacific Islanders student population grew from 2.4 to nearly 8%. So if the goal was for affirmative action to provide the best equal opportunity available, which was equal access to education, it did its part. And in fact, when you look at before this particular case and ruling, there were 9 states that rolled back affirmative action. And if you look at what happened, as in California being probably the most popular, understood, there was, without affirmative action, you saw a regression as it relates to underrepresented populations. And they've made some strides, and some of the strides have been supported by just the growth of those populations in those states. But we'll talk more about that. But so it just depends. If you're talking about what the goal was when it initially was enacted, we have seen some strides from it.
It's nice to know that there's been progress, and I think that's very important to keep in mind. Now, I know we talk about talent pipelines in the workforce, and so that leads me to you, Margaret. When you think about your work at Advanced Drainage Systems, also known as ADS, from your vantage point, tell us about how your organization builds relationships with colleges and universities to attract and recruit diverse talent?
Sure. So one of the things I'm most proud of, I have to say this before I answer your question about ADS. In my 20-year career of training, learning, and development, and DE&I, and I say this, and I'm sticking to this story, it is the first company that I have worked at that I feel like I can bring my authentic self to work. I am not code switching. I have been accepted for who I am. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that we haven't had challenges and trials and tribulations, but what I'm most proud of is how we work through that and find our way forward. So I just had to put that disclaimer out there. All right, answer your question. So our relationship with Ohio State has been very meaningful from the perspective of our engineering program, and we have partnered with Ohio State specifically for a pipeline for our corporate internship program, as well as looking at these students' ability to complete our program and ultimately be considered for hire. So we're on our second year of that program. Also, this year, we started partnering, well, I should say, when I came on board a year and a half ago, we started partnering with Preface at Ohio State, which is made up of students, 65 students of diverse backgrounds, right? And so they start as freshmen, and they go through this program until graduation. Well, this year, we're really leaning in with that program to also build a pipeline for our internship program. And, you know, I'm very transparent about the first 2 years of our program, we did not achieve the diversity that we wanted. So at ADS, we focus on, before I came on board, the company focuses on hiring and advancing women and people of color. So when I think about our internship program, where we were successful in getting women into the program, we have not been as successful as getting people of color. And so I'm leaning in constantly with the team and saying, what can we do? And so one of the things I'm proud of so far is the partnership that we have with Ohio State to build our talent pipeline. And just from a data perspective, so I can't do like you, but I do have a data point. Last year at ADS, we started the journey back in 2020, and last year we achieved a 39% increase at the management level of diversity. Our biggest success has been women, right? So still some work to do around people of color, but for us, I think that that is huge. Now, Kevin, my boss, is over there watching me, and I'm going to say this, and he tells me, you don't have to say that all the time, Margaret, but just think about this. Our company started in 1966, manufacturing and construction. In the history of ADS, there has never been a woman at the VP or C-suite level. Last year alone, we hired a VP, and we promoted a Black woman and another woman to VP. Like, for me, that is huge. In all of my years in corporate America, JP Morgan Chase, and Nationwide Financial, it took us anywhere from 3 to 5 years to prepare them and then promote. So when you talk about a company talking the talk and walking the walk, that is what I love most about this company, and we have only just got started.
Awesome. And it sounds like that relationship with Ohio State is very important.
Yes.
So we're going to continue to forge that. We definitely need to do that. And I would suggest that everyone in this room who's doing that type of work needs to continue to forge that relationship as well. So we get to go back to the legal world. So I'm going to ask a frank question because I hear a number of things from different DEI leaders, but I want to hear it from the legal perspective. Is affirmative action still relevant, or have societal changes and progress rendered it unnecessary?
I think we would all agree that there are changes we still want to see that are enacted. I think that what we've seen to date is going to look a little bit different moving forward. But to be clear, despite what some politicians might say out there, the decision does not say you can't have a diverse workforce, you can't be inclusive, you can't have these types of programs. You can't make specific decisions in bringing in people in admissions with race as one of the factors as race. And this is a time because a lot of things are up in the air, where you're going to have people trying to run with this as far as they can, in several directions. So I think that, yes, it's still relevant, and there's just going to be some differences as we move forward, and we're going to use probably some different language with some of them, especially when we're interacting with higher education institutions. It's going to look a little different probably for employers, but yeah, that would be my answer.
So speaking of its relevancy, I read an article that talked about race-neutral alternatives. And I had to pause, I had to do some research, and I said, no worries, Dr. Turner will be here to give me some guidance. So what race-neutral alternatives have been tried, and tell us how it worked?
So you'll find that if you look at the states that have banned affirmative action over the past couple of decades, it wouldn't be surprising for you to think that or consider first generation being something social, economic, class-based, has been something that many of these states have considered and are looking at and are actually have implemented. Even this idea of percent plans. I know the state of many of these states, if not all, that had banned affirmative action before June, have this top percent plan where if any students in the top 10, I've seen top 9, top 10, top 12.5%, would be automatically accepted into the schools, particularly the public schools. Now, I know in California specifically, they're automatically enrolled into the UC system, but they may not be able to choose the school of choice, right? And so it has been those kind of combinations. And then, many of you may be familiar with GRIT, that whole term of GRIT. Many schools now, and particularly prior to June, that were in this boat, looking at their essays based upon personal achievement, overcoming odds and challenges, and talking and looking at things like single-parent households and the language in the household. So it's those combinations have been considered and worked through for most of those states, and some have seen better success than others.
Awesome. It's nice to hear that that wasn't just a term that someone came up with, and that it's a real thing, and there have been things tried, and some of them were successful, maybe some of them weren't, and that's okay. So I want to go back to the corporate side of the world. Margaret, you talked a lot about the work you all are doing at ADS to make sure that you have a diversified staff and leaders promoted into roles. So what are some tactics that you're using to make sure that happens?
Part of our strategy at ADS is when I think about DE&I, and I'll never forget planning session we had to develop our ADS culture statement, which we consider as our North Star. And one of the things that is very important to us is that every employee at ADS feels like they're valued, respected, and heard, that they can bring their authentic self to work, right? And so we came up with this culture statement that has been socialized from the executive level out through our plants. And as I think about that statement, again, it is our North Star, our guiding light. And anytime any employee feels like they can't look at that statement and see themselves or feel that feeling, then we say, Houston, we have a problem. In the last 2 years, we have leaned in to focus on leadership development. So we have a program called Stepping Up to Leadership. We have a program called The Fan. And then recently we added another program called Advancing Leaders. And this is all around how do we prepare our leaders to communicate effectively that culture statement, and that they can have a team that feels like when I come in here, I feel like I belong here. Like, that is really important to us. And so when I think about alone stepping up to leadership, from the time we started the program last year to date, we have over 250 frontline leaders and managers that we've sent to that program. What warms my heart is when I get the emails from our employees and our leaders to say, the culture statement matters to me. I feel like I can identify it, right? Now, conversely, I've got a couple to say, my manager is not modeling this. What are you going to do about it, right? So I have to deal. Right, I have to deal with that. But overall, I feel like we have been very successful in investing in our talent, right? And again, on a weekly basis, I get those emails saying it matters. It feels good to be at ADS. The other thing that from a talent perspective, yes, it's about the work, but it's also about getting to know your employees and their families. So about 2 weeks ago, for the first time in the history of the company at the corporate level, we had what we call an ADS Family Day. So corporate-wide at our Hilliard office in Mill Run, we invited all of our corporate employees to our corporate headquarters to bring their families and just have a day of fun, slides, music, and it was just amazing. So again, those are the type of things that we are doing, not just, yes, we make pipe, we want to get the work done, but we want our employees to know that we value them. And so those are some of the things that we do to show that. But our leadership development programs have really been very beneficial at ADS.
I applaud you for that because many times people will come to me and they'll say, how do I build a diverse workforce? Help me with this. And they'll come to Kelly Fuller and ask her to help as well. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is that you have to have an inclusive workplace before you start bringing in all kinds of different folks. So I applaud you all for the work that you're doing. I want to go back to Dr. Turner for a second because in addition to DEI work, I'm also Process Excellence Queen. And it really concerns me when you think about all of the changes. What are some of the things that you have to do to change your admissions process? And is there a cost to that, whether it's time or dollars?
Now, I'm going to have to go to the paper on this one. So, absolutely. First of all, let me say, ahead of the decision, our Office of Academic Affairs convened a working group because, as you mentioned, to have to think through all the various aspects of such a large institution like The Ohio State University, they began to prepare for the potential impacts of the university's policies and practices and began to think about how they would update those. Since the ruling, in just the few months since then, the first thing they did was they pressed pause on all admissions decisions and basically reviewed all of the programs, processes that were completed to make sure they were in compliance. Any application question or line item requesting an applicant's race or ethnicity was removed from all materials provided to the application readers and the individuals participating in the admissions decision. And to allow programs to begin admitting, work is still ongoing. In fact, I was hopeful that I would be able to share more, but it's just been such a, they're working day in, day out. I know we have some of our people here, and this is something that's ongoing. Hopefully within the next week or two, we will have more guidance as to how we will proceed with respect to not only applications and admissions, but also scholarships and programming and retention programs and so forth. So as you can imagine, it is a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can imagine. There's a lot that comes to changing any process, right?
That's
and
right.
When I think about the university, admissions is bread and butter, so it's going to take some work, and we look forward to keeping our pulse on that and hearing what's going on. So I have one last question for everyone on the panel, and really simple, and we'll start with Erin. Where do we go from here?
Well, there are paths forward, and the Department of Justice and Department of Education released some joint guidance for everyone. As Dr. Turner's mentioned, California, Michigan, some other very large institutions have kind of rolled down the hill first for some of the rest of us. And so there's some really helpful information that they've been outwardly sharing to try to help institutions to transition during this time period. And so I do think that a lot of, again, what Dr. Turner said, look through all of your hiring processes, should that be at an issue. It's more of an issue at higher education institutions right now. But look through all of your admissions processes. Pay attention to any changes that are coming forward. There's a lot out there right now of people telling you what did and did not happen in the decision. Take it with a grain of salt. Look for more guidance and be ready to be flexible, to have to change some of the language and to have to adjust to a little bit of a new normal.
Mm-hmm. The new normal. So what do you think, Margaret? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so this is a very timely question. Another thing that I'm proud of ADS is last month I meet with our board quarterly and I give an update on our DE&I strategy from the perspective of the workplace, workforce, community, and partnership. And so one of the things that Kevin and I met with the board about this last time was about affirmative action. And we just had a conversation. I had an hour on the agenda. I usually only get 15 minutes. I had a whole hour on the agenda, and just to talk about affirmative action, what we're hearing, where are we going? And Scott Barber, our CEO, said to me in a lunch conversation is, I don't care about the noise outside. We are going to keep leaning in, and our foot is on the pedal. That conversation with the board was just so refreshing for me, because as we went around the room, each board member shared their perspective, their thoughts, and I'll never forget one board member said, since you've been on the team, Margaret, and we have these conversations with you on a quarterly basis, I have learned so much, right? And then proceeded to say, if there's anything that you need, first, do you have everything you need to be successful at ADS? I said, yes, I do. And he said to me, if ever a time comes where you feel like you're not being valued or supported, you will let us know, right? And I said, yes. So the thing that we committed to last month in that meeting was, we're going to keep leaning in, and where our strategy was around DE&I, those 4 priorities, we are now going to shift and talk more about our culture of engagement. And working with our consultant, with Shavana, she's right over there, who's the brilliant mind behind that statement, and Scott Barber, myself, and a couple other leaders developed that statement. And one of the things that Scott said, you know what, Margaret, when I think about DE&I, at the end of the day, this is really about culture. This is about the people, what they experience when they come into our environment. And so for us, where we are not going to shy away from diversity, equity, and inclusion and using that language, what we are going to do is evolve and transform into our focus around that we have a culture of engagement and belonging, and that every employee can say, I feel valued, respected, and heard at ADS. So some have challenged us and me on that approach to say, oh, you're running away because of affirmative action and all of those things. Well, think what you may. We are true to our word and our commitment, and so that's where we're going to keep leaning in, Sharice.
And I love to hear that. I think many people don't know that a lot of our DEI professionals as a whole were beginning to focus more on culture before any of this happened. So I think that's important to point out. Dr. Turner, where do we go?
Well, if we start talking about language, I think many of us here realize that language has been evolving since affirmative action. When I was in school, the office was of minority affairs. It wasn't diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's, the language is continuing to evolve. What I will say is that we do have to look at the data and be very clear and thoughtful about that. Starting in 2026, the high school population, graduation population, will start shrinking, and it will become more diverse. And so the reality is that whatever you call it, we still need to think about there's still a solid, strong business case for diversity for corporations. That has not changed. How we look at diversity, I think is going to be critical if we look at it from a social economics point of view. From what I've seen, my My challenge or what my push would be for us to look at how we look at social economic status. When we start talking about certain areas, or when we start talking about first gen, here's what we lose. We lose when we talk about diversity. We lose that middle class of those parents who are first gen, who have students who will be coming through, but because they don't check the box, the students themselves do not check the box as first gen, they may not get admitted. The problem with the socioeconomic piece that I'm hopeful that we will grapple with is the wealth piece. It is one thing to speak to income, because many, we've seen strides when it comes to the gap between, of all the races when it comes to income. But the wealth gap is still immense. And so until we start dealing with that and making those decisions, my concern is that what we will see in the classroom, what we will see on campus, will be some perpetuation of stereotypes that for people of color will not represent the diaspora of who we are and what we've accomplished. And so I'm hopeful that we will be thoughtful about this as we talk about how do we move forward so that our students, all students, will be prepared for a diverse organizations like ADP and all the other corporations, and think about how does that need to look on campuses, and making sure that the metrics we use really actually captures that and makes it inclusive for all.
I think that's a round of applause.
Cherise, thank you very much, and thank you to today's panelists. We've got lots of questions coming in from the online audience and some questions submitted in advance. And if you have a question and you're in the room here with us today, please come stand right up here behind me. We'll alternate taking questions from the live stream audience and then taking your questions from the in-person audience till we run out of time today. So I'm going to start with a question from Dwight Smith. How will the Supreme Court's ruling impact minority or Black-owned businesses?
Oh, wow. So when I think about it from the chamber standpoint, this is my theory. Minority and Black-owned businesses are as old as time. We've been doing this forever. Do we need some support? Do we need additional resources? Yes, we do. At the same time, when you think about right after the Civil War and when slaves were freed, I believe that we had some of the most prosperous communities of color, specifically Black, that we've ever seen. So my theory is we're going to keep chugging, we're going to keep pushing, and at the chamber, we're here to support minority-owned businesses, and we're glad to be a part of their staff and a part of the work that they're doing. So we're going to keep pushing.
Good afternoon, Elena Biffle, Master Keys Investments. Quick question. How do you all see the impact to women? Obviously, women have advanced in the workplace and in colleges. Do you see this decision impacting the role and the presence of women?
I will say that the decision itself does not include gender or sex. It is limited to race, but in California, the voters in 1996, the changes, they excluded both race and gender from consideration in admissions. So there is data that tracks some of the impact of that. So in terms of how this decision will impact it, I think it might be helpful to review that. But just to clarify where this decision hits.
I will just say, not yet. Just, out of fairness, right? We already seeing lawsuits coming after different, So right now, it is open the door for more litigation to see where we stand. But as was shared, hasn't impacted, I think, Black women, Hispanic women, may feel a bit of this because of the intersectionality, but as it relates to women, not yet. But we can expect their potential litigation will be on its way to test that.
And I would just add from my perspective, given the data I shared about our 39% increase last year, from my vantage point, it does not impact women for the work that we're doing because, in my opinion, women have been the biggest beneficiary of DE&I and certainly at our company. We do have more work to do as it relates to women of color, so we need to lean in a little bit more there.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if you're familiar, there is a lawsuit that just was brought forth against it was an investment firm that was investing exclusively in Black women businesses. So again, we will see how that plays out, but yeah, that's why I said not yet, yeah.
And I believe that was the Fearless Fund, if
Yes,
I'm correct?
that's correct.
Yes.
That's correct.
So I want to add, even piggybacking off of the question about how this affects Black-owned businesses, how it affects women-owned, I would suggest that we know that these lawsuits may keep coming. Maybe they won't, but history is showing that they will. So if you are Black-owned, and also if you're Black, if you are any other minority in this room, I would suggest that it's incumbent upon each of us to make sure that we are supporting our own and that we're supporting our businesses. I find that Black philanthropy is at an all-time high, and so if the Fearless Fund goes away, my challenge is what do we have that can replace that?
Thank you. And please, for the in-person audience, don't be shy. The online audience is not with their questions, so please do join me at the microphone. I'm going to combine a couple of questions here together, and I'll paraphrase them a little bit, but I think the questions are basically asking, what is the heart of the higher education ruling itself, which I think involved Harvard and the University of North Carolina?
So the quick answer is that the Supreme Court found the processes that they follow, which, just to be clear, were compliant with the prior U.S. Supreme Court direction on how to move forward in this, were unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment, which may raise some eyebrows because Harvard is a private school. And the reason was because they considered race, and it did not meet what they call the strict scrutiny standard. So when race is involved, the Supreme Court has what they consider the highest threshold for state actors and the use of race. So they said basically, and I'm paraphrasing literally hundreds of pages here, they said that what Harvard and UNC had put forward as the goals they were trying to meet, while they might be great, they were too squishy essentially to measure, which is interesting because a lot of those goals were from a previous decision that a different majority of the U.S. Supreme Court had told everyone were measurable. So this majority said, there's no way for us to know how this has really impacted, minority business owners out in the community, or how this has increased, cross-racial communications in schools, or had all these educational benefits, which I will tell you the minority and many amicus brief writers will vehemently disagree with and provide lots of data. But the majority said, we see it, it's just not enough for us under strict scrutiny because we have to look at these laws and look at them with suspicion and assume essentially they're not valid unless they're very, very narrowly, necessarily tailored to the goal. And they looked at how race was defined on these admissions criteria. And they said, look, on some of these you're looking at really 6 categories, African American, white, there's none for Middle Eastern. This doesn't, they basically said it's over-inclusive and under-inclusive at the same time. And there's just no way for them to feel like this isn't improper stereotyping, to assume that people, because of a box they checked, would have the same views or bring diversity to the group. And the other piece they really focused on was this time limit. They said, look, our past history where we've said that race could be considered had to sunset at some point. We're not seeing any cognizable end to this. This is just unwieldy. We can't review it. It's unconstitutional. I could literally talk about that for like an entire day, so there's a lot more nuance to it than even that, but hopefully that was helpful.
Hi, Doug Buchanan, Columbus Business First. I've seen some reporting that nationwide, anyway, DE&I positions are being left unfilled in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling and culture wars in this country. I'm just wondering what you're seeing as far as the corporate community's commitment to DE&I now versus maybe immediately in the wake of George Floyd, and what your feelings are about that going forward.
You want to take that, Margaret? Or?
Sure. So, again, not to be redundant, our commitment remains. However, in my circle of practitioners and professionals, there are those that have been let go, or the strategy has shifted to roll into another department, not calling it DE&I because of all of the noise. And so I'll never forget, a couple months ago, I was at the Deloitte's Chief Diversity Officer Forum, and Dr. Chan made a statement which I wholeheartedly agree with. He said for us to stay the course and stay committed, right? That this inconvenience does not give us a pass to no longer be committed. And the other thing that he said was, at the end of the day, those making the most noise gets the headlines, right? But you still have the champions behind the scene, companies and corporations. There are more of us staying the course and leaning in than there's those that are jumping ship, right? And I do believe that. So has an impact? Yes, but I think we just need to stay committed to the cause.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to staying committed and staying the course, which we're doing as well, I think it's important to challenge all of our DEI leaders, no matter if you're in the social justice, corporate, nonprofit space, to learn how to make what you do systemic and not performative. Because if it's systemic, then no matter what happens, it's just a part of the process. It's a part of the practice. It's the way the business works, the way you operate. It's in your DNA. So if you walk out here with nothing else, stay the course, make it systemic.
Yeah. And if I could just add, I think it's really important to recognize that after George Floyd, there was a lot of performative types of activities. So it is really difficult to assess where we are today than we were with George Floyd. Chief Diversity Officer became the new thing, and unfortunately, it was not well thought out at many of the companies. And so what you found was that you identified individuals, you put them in those roles that were not well resourced, and as a consequence, the failure was a kind of reflection of, we tried this and check the box and move on. So I think it was not just simply, I think there were a combination of things that when you see what's happening now in corporate, for those companies who were committed, they've stayed the course. Those who were responding, I think this is what you're seeing is just this hemorrhaging. But that would have happened anyway because it was never genuine and authentic. So I want us to make sure that we make that distinction.
Good afternoon, Robbie Banks with the Columbus Partnership. I'm curious to know your thoughts on how the supplier diversity programs have been affected or will be affected by this ruling.
It's a good question. I think that's another Cherise question, right? And Robbie's my neighbor down the hall. So when I think about the work that I'm seeing across organizations, ironically, I can speak for the chamber, our phone's ringing more. People want to dig deeper. They want to know about more diverse businesses whom they can partner with. I can give two examples. NiSource is one. They just had an amazing supplier day, and they're really committed to doing business, and they were making deals in the room. Victoria's Secret is another one, very committed. Once again, making deals in the room. So ironically, our phone is ringing more, and we're helping more people. At the same time, we are realistic, and we know that if the trend continues, that there will be an impact. But while that phone's ringing, we're going to keep helping.
And I would add, where supplier diversity does not fall under my umbrella, one of the things that we're doing at ADS under our partnership umbrella, and we identify them as XBEs, and it's all women, women, people of color businesses, et cetera. And one of the things that we did last year was to lean in with our sales teams to get more partnership with businesses. And don't quote me on the numbers, Kevin, what's the number? We have an increase of what in Black business and women-owned businesses? About 35%. So we're leaning in there, and I'm working with the sales guy, and I meet with them on a quarterly basis, and they have done a phenomenal job of building a whole strategy. And so on a quarterly basis, we also give that update to our board.
Thank you. Question, is affirmative action an American phenomenon? Has it been tried in other nations that are trying to come to terms with their own histories of discrimination?
So affirmative action is a very squishy term, which, just to be clear, but yes, lots of other countries have some sort of program. Many countries use quotas, which are illegal here, but they will actually set percentages aside reflective of their population for various positions. That is expressly not allowed here. Other countries have similar remedial type remediation, affirmative efforts. So no, we are, this is not a uniquely United States matter. Now our history is unique to us, and so it looks different here, but.
Hi, how are you? My name is Eldridge Carr. I'm the very proud head of school at Marvin Academy. We are a 2nd through 12th grade school. And my question is relatively straightforward. I think many of us in here are probably past the point of college admittance or university admission, but what would you say to support all students, but particularly sophomores, juniors, and seniors in this period of time that is a little unclear about what the future holds, both for admissions and for employment?
Dr. Turner, we're looking at you.
Well, a couple of things. I would like to piggyback on that, and I'll come back to that. I think it's going to be important more than any time now that our corporate partners will commit to more pre-collegiate programming. I think it's important that as we start thinking about how we wrap our heads around making this a more, this whole admission, this experience more inclusive, such that individuals from whatever high school program that they attend, that they have that opportunity, we need corporate involvement. Oftentimes, I will say this as it relates to Fisher, we've been very intentional in reaching out and providing programming for the student population, especially when we start looking more at the social economic piece of that. It tends to be the case that when you're looking at the lower socioeconomic stratum, that you're dealing with students who are not exposed. And exposure is critical as we start thinking about high school graduation to college entrance, right? And so I think it is a partnership that is going to require companies to start thinking about how do they play a role in making sure that as we deal with this new norm, that we're still bringing that diverse student population and all students thinking about this admissions and make sure that the gap between graduation and college enrollment, we can minimize that with the tools we use. So first of all, I would say corporations here, you need to really, as we reach out and talk about this is not something, unfortunately, that you will be able to tie directly to a bottom line immediate. This is a long-term types of strategy. And so this is really critical, and that's why many times companies don't wade in that water. But it is going to be absolutely imperative that as we think about how this will impact students that are sophomores, juniors, if they don't think there are opportunities, if they don't get admitted to the schools that of choice, we don't want them to then say, I don't want to go to school. Right? And so it is important that we make sure that they see college as the desired aim, and wherever they land, that they will bloom. And so we need to make sure that exposure is important. Encouragement, I think we will try our best, and I'm looking at pre-collegiate programs to ensure them there's a place at the table for them. And it may take a moment to get to the very table they want, but, as long as they continue to progress, and I think that's something we can have conversations, how we can do better institutionally as well.
I feel bad. I feel like Dr. Turner's being targeted this last portion of the session, so apologies up front. Janine Watkins, I'm the Vice President for People and Culture at Denison University. And my question, Dr. Turner, is some of the things that I'm hearing, so I'm curious if you're hearing as well, while the decision primarily was focused on enrollment, we're definitely having conversations at the staff level around how will this impact us? How will this impact hiring? How is this decision at some point going to roll down into our lives and how we as people leaders promote? And I'm just curious if you're having the same conversations, how are you all having those discussions with openness and transparency while at the same time not creating some of those pockets of anxiety where it doesn't need to exist yet?
Well, I'm going to start legal first. You want to hit it with legal? No?
Who are you pointing to?
Listen. In candor, okay, so when you say that, are you talking about individuals who are in the diversity space? Absolutely, or just in general, people of color? Because those are two different things. Because it's important to recognize that this ruling did not impact, not yet, it has not impacted
Correct. So
the
not
hiring piece, right?
Not in our space in terms people and culture, so I'm kind of all of it, right? Because our culture doesn't exist without inclusivity and belonging. And so to your earlier point, it's about infusing it into everything we do, whether it's
Right.
hiring, promoting, the food that we order, the way the grounds look, it's about that voice. Yet while the decision didn't directly impact, the discussions are, this is step one. Where is it going to go next? What's coming after that by our population, not necessarily by the individuals doing the work, but the population is asking those of us doing the work the question, are we next? Are we going to see decisions coming from the Supreme Court that now impact our standard of how we hire, how we promote, just the normal daily life, almost the where will it end, if it will end? And I don't expect anyone to have an answer. Are you all hearing the same? Right.
Yes, those are, but actually, that's an interesting question. I hear it more on the diversity side. So because I'm a chief diversity officer at Fisher, there are concerns in that space, right? Because we are seeing state after state, they're closing, shuttering diversity offices. And so they're like, okay, how is that impacting me in this space, right? Not so much so this idea of the hiring. I know you said this, where does it end, right? But I'm not hearing that so much as I'm hearing more concerns about those who are operating in the diversity, equity, inclusion spaces. How long am I safe? What's happening there, right? I will say again, one of the things that I am encouraged by is Gen Z, our kids, are demanding things that it's going to move all of us to think about this differently, right? They're making decisions on the companies they will work for based upon diversity, whether or not we want to embrace that or not. Our stakeholders, corporate stakeholders, customers, they're looking at this as well. As diversity, however we call it, this is a responsibility from corporations, so they're gonna still look for that within the organization. So again, I don't know where we're in, but I am encouraged by the fact that I think that we understand that the only way we will continue to thrive as a country is that we have to be inclusive of all diversity and make sure that everyone must thrive.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I would just like to add to that real quickly. I just had this conversation with Laura yesterday about the diverse pipeline that of talent, right, that we're looking at. And we've had candidates go out to our website and say, what is your diversity statement? Right. What do you believe, right? And again, we started this journey in 2020, and so we are evolving, and so that is part of our commitment too, that we need to be very clear about what we believe. So we do have our ADS culture statement and what we believe now on our website. However, that was at a prompting of a candidate that says, oh, you're not serious about diversity because it's not on your website. Note taken, Heather made it happen, got it done.
I wish we had more time. As you can see, we can talk about this all day long. But we're going to wrap up our panel and turn it over to Amelia Robinson.
Thank you so much. Well, I really hope you guys found this conversation is oddly optimistic. Like, this is more optimistic than I thought it was going to be going into this conversation, because there's been a lot of pessimism and, defeated people around these topics. So thank you for sharing the commitments that are being made by corporations in our community. I would like to also thank our event sponsors, Event Marketing Strategies, and the Thanks Be to God Foundation. Thanks to Grange Insurance Audubon Center for hosting today's event. Also want to thank our virtual seat patrons, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. And also, again, want to thank this fantastic panel, Aaron Butcher, Margaret Finley, Dr. Cynthia Turner, and our host, Sharice Sledge-Thomas. And if you have not already, please make plans to attend next week's forum. It's going to be a really good one, Ohio's political future from the House Speaker's chair, and it's going to be with House Speaker Jason Stevens. Also, please take a couple minutes before you leave to fill out the short survey you'll find on our website. You can do it at your office. You don't have to do it right now because it's on the website. We could not do this without all of you, so thank you for joining us and have a great day.